Hi and welcome. My name's Marie and I'm the founder of Unfunk Your Soul. Unfunk Your Soul is a collective, a movement, a brand that unites, founded out of my desire to honor my journey and to introduce you to mind body practices to unfunk yourself. In this next episode, I'll be talking about saying sorry and discussing, is sorry really the hardest word to say? So let's strip it back a little here, shall we? I grew up in an environment where receiving a silent treatment was a go-to method of letting you know that you did wrong, but didn't really know why. Now it could go from a day, 2 days, a week, a couple of months without actually having any communication from a primary caregiver. So that was a standard response to a lot of things for me growing up. And that's something that I'm very mindful of. That's something that I do find myself sometimes slipping into when I feel a little overwhelmed with family, friends, work. I'll go quiet. That could be a case perhaps of me processing what's going on. It could be me just kind of avoiding confrontation. It could just be me, that just the fact that I'm just totally exhausted. So I do go a little quiet. Now, sometimes, quietness doesn't phase me. I'm very at home when it's quiet, and I know other people perhaps struggle with the concept of being quiet, being okay. I know there's plenty of people that like to fill silence with something and feel as though they have to because they feel a little perhaps unsettled by silences. But as I've just said, that was part and parcel. A lot of my childhood was silence, either my own silence from not speaking up or being given the silent treatment. So silence for me doesn't make me feel uncomfortable. I'm very at home in silence. Um, so what had happened is there was a situation last week whereby I'd had an exceptionally busy day at work. It's one of those ones where you kind of pulled from pillar to post. You don't know up from down and round, right from wrong. And it was just a lot. So by the time I got home at like 5 o'clock, I was pretty much spent. But I knew that I had a busy evening ahead. I knew I had that anyway. If any of you if you know young people, and if you've come across anyone that is doing their Duke of Edinburgh, it's a stressful time to sort out kit lists and food supplies and everything else that they need to go off. So this is what was happening in my house last week. Bearing in mind, I have two teenagers that you would hope would be a little more self-guided when it comes to an activity that they're doing, but no. I know I have a tendency to micromanage things, but it would be helpful if on occasion that they would take the initiative and do that managing themselves. But yes, so particularly on this Thursday, so I had a mega busy day at work, to come home then to get the final kits together for them to go off on the expedition the following day. And I was very mindful that we had a list of things we needed to get done. So I was spent emotionally, patience, and everything else. So I had a interaction with one of my children that erupted quite vocally, and I ended up going for a walk. As you know me by now, going for a walk is my answer to a majority of things in life. So I went for a walk, and one of these walks, and I'd kind of said, I don't know whether or not they needed batteries, but I get a few tendencies. I get things in my head thinking they need to take spare batteries. So I was contemplating, do I get these batteries or do I teach them a lesson and not get them? But then I came to the conclusion that I wasn't going to be spiteful and not get the batteries. So I did get the batteries and proceeded to go for a walk. I was gone for about 40 minutes, came back. And then had the opportunity, which I think is, this is the point of this podcast, is I had the opportunity to sit down with one of my children who we'd had this verbal altercation with. And they apologized to me for how they'd spoken to me and how they hadn't taken into consideration the amount of organizing that I had done on the sidelines. And I also apologized for what I'd said. It was very much heat at the moment. And as soon as I said what I said, I was like, that was pretty uncalled for to say that. I seriously, I'd lost my cool. I'd lost my rag at that point. And I did feel bad for what I said. I don't feel bad for feeling the way that I did. And again, that kind of perhaps lack of awareness of pressure, perhaps that I was under, and that expectation almost that, you know, young people these days, well, young people, my young people, they do lots of activities, but where we live, they can't get to a lot of their activities without having transport. And there's no bus route for a lot of these things, or occasionally they can get the bus or the train. But a lot of the times I have to take them places, and that includes work as well. There's no direct bus route or means to get to their place of work. So I just kind of erupted as like, you know, you're expecting me just to take you to these places and to get these things, but you have to be a little more responsible and a little more considered that I have other things that I need to be doing, working all day, running my own business, being a parent, and these little unseen things that they don't see. And I think, you know, when you're bamboozled with emails that need replies and all the unseen things that they don't even know what's going on in the background. And it was just like, you just don't realize. I don't share everything that I have to do for you. And I'm asking you to do some simple things, and they're not simple. This is how the conversation went. But I did apologize for what I said and how I said it, because it was just, there was no need for it, even though I was tired, and I acknowledged that. And it was that kind of opportunity for both of us to be heard and listened to and be able to speak our piece without being judged. And I think that helped. And I suppose that's the point that I'm trying to make, is we don't always get opportunity to apologize and repair relationships. And I'm not saying apologies to excuse poor behavior. I'm not saying that at all, because I don't think an apology can wipe out poor behavior. And I've been on the receiving end of quite a bit poor behavior. And I know that I've shared previously about the abuse that I've had from ex-partners. And I don't believe that apologies can wipe out that abusive behavior. And apologies that I'm talking about in this episode are not those. I'm thinking where there's been heightened emotions and you've not been able to communicate effectively what has been troubling you. And sometimes we don't always have the language for how we're feeling in that moment. It's only afterwards, when you've got that time to process what's happened and why you've responded that way. And to have the opportunity then to repair after something like that is huge. And I think when I sat down there calmly and I spoke with my child about how we were both feeling in that moment, that's huge. That I know that's something that would never have featured in my own childhood growing up. And I of the mind that my children won't even think that that's a big thing, because we do communicate quite well. So for them, that's the norm. And that's another conversation that I had with my elder child, is that she'd mentioned that the younger two are lucky that they didn't have the same experiences as her growing up. And as I said to her, that's not their fault that their life is different. That's a bonus that theirs is. It's unfortunate that my eldest experience in their childhood is was different or was as challenging as it was. But the younger two don't know any different. They only know now. And that's the growth element. That's the change. That's me being the parent now is different to how I parented 25 years ago. That's my growth. That's my journey. That's how I'm trying to live a different life or trying to be a better parent. And it's not about perfection. And I say that to my children all the time, and I say it to everybody else. I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to do better and be better. I'm not going to get it right, and I don't get it right. And sometimes I can kick myself because sometimes I'm a little bit negative about how I talk. And I have to stop myself sometimes because when I realize what I'm doing, I'm like, oh, I'm trying so hard not to be that person who moans and complains, because when I see other people do it, it's quite wearisome. It's quite exhausting. And I think if you want change to occur, that change starts with you. So if you want different outcomes and you want different results, you've got to change something. You can't expect other people to do that for you. You have to be the instigator. It's you that's brought this to the forefront. So if that is that if someone else's energy is draining you and you're still putting yourself in that situation, then you're to blame because they're not doing what they need to change. And it's not your role, it's not your place to encourage them to change. They need to come to that point themselves. That was like a conversation I had the other day. And we were talking about parents' mental health and alcoholism and how people's journey into recovery or asking for help is theirs. And it can be heartbreaking and soul destroying to see somebody's mental health decline, and where alcohol is a factor, how people continually choose alcohol over those people they're closest to. That can be heartbreaking to witness and be a part of. But if they're not going to change or going to ask and seek out support, what can you do? You can't do anything. You're not responsible for those people. They're adults. They need to come to that point themselves. And a part of that acceptance is they may never come to that conclusion. They may never get to that point where they think, okay, I've got a problem. I need to seek out some help. They may never get there. So my point is that if you have somebody in your life and you wish to repair relationships, or you feel as though you need to hear them out, make the time to do it. Make the time to do it. And I think as one thing that I've come to terms with a long time ago is that I may never get an apology from either of my parents for their past behaviors or the things that they've said, whether that's been in the depths of crisis or feeling hurt about something I did or didn't do. I may never get the apology. And in some respects, I'm okay with that because I'm not living my life waiting for that apology. I came to that conclusion a long time ago that I would never get it. But with my relationship with my own children, I'm trying to do better. And as I read in, well, come across my algorithm, we're not owed a relationship with our children. It's a blessing to have them. but they're individuals and they have their own personalities, and there may be things that they do that just aren't what we would do, but that's us and that's them. And we have to give them that. We're just, I can't think of the word. We're just, our point is to a certain point in their lives, and then it's their life. And no matter if we approve or not approve of their life and their life choices, we are there. We will always be their parent, but we're not always guaranteed a place in their life. And sometimes you have to realize that the job that you've done or the person that you're supposed to be isn't necessarily the person that turns up for them or doesn't turn up or shuts the door on them, is what I've learned in my case as well. So apologies. Sorry doesn't have to be the hardest word you say. Sorry can be the olive branch. It can be a conversation starter. It can just be a case of you owning your shit and knowing when you've done wrong or you've overstepped the mark is just so fundamental to growth and growing in life and honoring your journey and all that you are. The messed up, imperfect individual that is still learning about themselves. There's no shame in that. We don't always get it right, but it's knowing that we don't always get it right and acknowledging that as well. Rather than go through this life like everyone owes you something. No one owes you anything. And like I say, that includes your children. They don't owe you anything. And I think there's a lesson to be learned there by many, many people who think that your children are ungrateful. They don't see everything that you do or what you've experienced to get to that point in that moment. They don't see it. But unless you communicate it, how are they going to see it anyway? Because they don't know. They're not mind readers. So it's apologizing and saying sorry is part of effective communication. And if you want things to be different, you have to communicate. Communicate your needs, wants, desires, things that annoy you, things that you are struggling with. Communicate. So your apology is linked into communicating. And that's today's lesson. I don't even know how I came to that conclusion, but it is. It's about effective communication. It just makes sense. Thank you for listening to this episode of UNFUNK Your Soul. Make sure to rate and follow everywhere you listen to your podcast and to keep up to date with the latest episodes by clicking notifications.